Hi guys, it's Jill, and today we are going to be doing a self-haltering video with our lovely model Danny here. He's a 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred named Firenado, but we said that's a terrible name. Let's call him Danny. So Danny was mishandled and has had a lot of trauma around people and interacting with them, so he's sometimes hard to catch. So while he was on stall rest, I was like, let's work on this issue. And I started by presenting the halter to him, and just when he would bump it, touch it, move in the direction of it, I would click. You could also start with a classical conditioning procedure here and just feed the horse when you bring out the halter. Don't have them do anything with it. Just bring out the halter, feed. Put it behind your back, bring out the halter, feed. Put it behind your back, then bring out the halter, feed. That's classical conditioning, pairing, associative learning, respondent, whatever. But this that we're doing here is operant. He is operating the halter by touching it, and then he gets a click from me and a treat. And you'll notice I'm feeding out of my personal space, away from my body. He's not searching me for the treats. We don't want that, and I have other videos on that if you're struggling there. The horses do have to know what the clicker means and how to behave around food before you can start this process. So I do recommend checking those videos out. I'm not going to go over it here. But yeah, so basically I'm just clicking and feeding for touching the halter. And now I have slowly raised the criteria to, can you touch the halter and drop your head just a little bit? You'll see he moved away there. So I'm looking for him to drop his head just like a fraction of an inch, maybe, down in the direction of the halter, because I want him to put his head in it. So we're working in small pieces, having the horse be the one in control. That's what I really love about positive reinforcement, is it really allows the learner to be the one in control. You could see he's looking there for the answer. And I was like, you're so close, do that there, and then clicked. And I didn't want him to go all the way in. I just want to work in really small pieces. It's great that he's overzealous, but I do want to maintain a little bit of control. You know, I don't want him to go so hard that he scares himself. And you see there, that was very deliberate, put his nose in, and he gets a click and a treat. So every time I click, I give one treat. I use alfalfa pellets, the Standlee brand. They're very low in sugar and starch. I wouldn't recommend using actual treats just because they're very high in sugar. It's not great for horses. So there's my boss. And I'm just still holding the halter. You see he's very engaged, and he's really got that the two criteria he's working with now were touch the halter, now touch the halter and drop your head into it. So I'm not really looking for him to touch it anymore. You'll see I'm not clicking for that. And he's just moving around it. I'm letting him get comfortable with the idea of it. And then that was awesome. A really big move. You know, it's a lot easier for horses that have already been haltered before to kind of get this quicker. So like young horses or horses that have never been halter broke, it might be a little more challenging to get the idea. And you see my buoy target stick attached to my treat pouch there. I've used that under it to ask the horses to target their noses through it. But, you know, Danny's a horse that already knows targeting or haltering. So he caught on pretty quickly. But the goal here was not that, you know, Danny doesn't know what a halter is. The goal is to create not only a positive association with something that he didn't like before, counter conditioning. We're teaching him now that the halter brings good things, and beyond that, he has control. And I want him to put it on just like that. What a good boy. Just diving his nose in there. He rocks. And he doesn't love the scratches, so I stopped because you see he moved his head away. And Danny is very expressive. You see me lifting the halter. He moved his head away again, so I removed it. I want him to be the one that's in control. And if at any time he's uncomfortable, he takes a step back or turns his head away from me, that's okay. I will take the pressure off. And I don't mean pressure in the pressure and release traditional sense. I mean sometimes looking at him or touching him. You see I looked at him and he moved his head away. So I have to be really aware of my body around Danny. I lifted the halter there and got a complete back out of the stall. I can't remember if something happened behind or if it genuinely was just me lifting the halter, but then he came right back, put his nose in, really good. Probably should have clicked for the first one, but went ahead and waited for a little bit more. Then I readjusted my body so I'm not facing him as much. And then, wow, what a good one. But still, It's just any little thing is a little bit too much for him sometimes. So, I'm just keeping it calm and low key. I probably dropped the halter a little bit abruptly, and that was not good for him. So then I lift it back up, ask him to drop it in, and hold it. So now the criteria has moved past put your nose down into it, into can you hold your nose there for a second? Because in order for me to get the buckle up and over, the horse is going to have to be able to hang their nose down there for a second. So I don't want them to lift up and back out. I probably should have clicked there, full disclosure, but it's always like when you're in the moment, it's different than watching it back. Every time I train and I watch it back, I'm like, oh my God, I missed so many opportunities. But it's all a part of learning and tuning your skills. And, I haven't had to work with many horses on haltering recently. So this one was a refresher course, if you will. And Danny's a little bit different than the others I've worked with because he does have that fearful element. So it's purely I'm allowing him to put the halter on himself just like that. So I didn't want to reward or reinforce that pulling his head out. I want to make sure that I'm clicking when his head is in it and he's staying and not pulling back. Otherwise, you can accidentally reinforce that removing behavior. So there, I probably was going too fast. Just moving that little headpiece, and he went to check it out, which is totally fine. I want him to investigate the things that he might be a little bit nervous about. You see, I clicked for that investigative behavior because previously Danny is one that would be like, that scared me. I'm just going to bounce actually, instead of, that made me a little nervous. Let me take a closer look and see. So I really love that. It's very brave of him, just knowing who he is. And then he comes right back, sticks his nose in it, touches the little scary piece. And then we ask, can you go back in the halter? He says, this way? No, this way. Very good. Nice. And I just wanted to get a little bit more there. I'm frustrated watching this. But I think it's good to see me not doing it perfectly. This is me just justifying my actions here. But so I can talk about some of the mistakes that I make, that commonly other people make. Just can you put your head back in is what I should have dropped the criteria to. Because every time you raise a criteria, you have to have less expectation. So we talked about, I want him to drop his nose down into it, and then I want him to stay there for a second. So if I'm asking him to stay there, his nose might not be as far down. And if I want to lift the halter up or go for the headpiece, I'm not going to be able to ask him to stay as long, because when you raise criteria, some of the finesse that you've had before might fall apart, and probably will. So you have to kind of lower it a little bit. And what's also frustrating about watching this is that I didn't really have the previous steps super solid. Full disclosure, it does end up working out, but I didn't have everything super solid and him very comfortable sticking his nose in and hanging out in the halter before I started raising my criteria again. So I really recommend making sure that the horse is 100% comfortable, not showing any of the signs that Danny was. You see, I went for the over the head piece and I made him a little bit nervous. He didn't leave, but he was like, whoa, what's happening? But I had done a little bit of moving the headpiece. I just wish I had waited until he was signaling to me that he was very comfortable with that headpiece moving. And see, the second time I didn't sling it as far so it didn't touch his ear there, which is better. Pro tip also, this is a very stiff old halter. So I do recommend using a stiff old halter because it makes it much easier to have the nose ring open, because I've tried using nylon ones before and it gets frustrating for the trainer. But you see, I pulled it over his head there and I clicked just for him hanging out. He's still taking a look at that head collar piece. So ask him to drop his nose again, stay there while I sling it over and grab it. Nice. And just fidgeting with it a little bit to mimic the buckling made him a little bit nervous. So hopefully, I haven't watched this video in a minute, hopefully I'm going to do that again. and fidget with the buckle to get him a little bit more comfortable with that before going to buckling. Either that or I'm going to be greedy trainer Jill okay, thank you, Jill. Jeez. So I noticed, thankfully, that jiggling the buckle made him a little bit nervous. So I went back a step to can I just toss it over your head? And you'll see I'm waiting to do anything until he consents by putting his nose in the halter. I'll show you that again here after we get past this click and feed. So the stiff halter is really just amazing. So I wait for him to ask to put his nose in. I'm not raising it up to him. And then see his head's getting a little bit high, but his eyes calm, his ears calm, and he's happy. So, I mean, that's the best it could go. And then you see I raised my hands to take the buckle off, and he said, I don't think so. So this I will say is the one problem with skipping steps like I did in this video. The benefit to going quickly is that I can show you all of the steps in a digestible video. The not so good part is that I end up with lots of head turning from the horse. So instead of just keep pushing the issue because I'm like, oh my God, I need to get the halter off. I'm like, okay, let's take it back a step. Can I lift my hand to the buckle? And when I turned towards him there, he backed up. And so when he was going to take a step forward, I just lifted my hand so I could click and shape that behavior. He was already coming forward, so I could click while he was already doing that as I'm lifting my hand to tell him that's right. And then I just wanted to go ahead and get it off just in case. And he was a little bit nervy about it, but he was overall pretty good. And I decided that's where I needed to end the session. So I made a pile of alfalfa pellets he has a little feed pan in the stall. And you can see him doing a lot of head turning away from it. But yeah, this is our end of session cue. It indicates to him that the session is over. He gets a big reward. It prevents a whole slew of negative punishment at the end of a training session. If you just leave, the horse is like, what did I do? But yeah, that is the imperfect tutorial on how to teach a horse to self-halter. I do think it's good to see some of my errors so that I can walk you guys through troubleshooting simultaneously. Although I do wish I was perfect, it's just not the way of the world. Everyone's an individual, every horse is individual, and sometimes it just doesn't look super beautiful. But we'll get there. It's all a learning process, right? So yeah, I'm going to run you guys through this one more time just to kind of give you a little bit of a shaping plan idea. So first things first, the horse must know what the clicker means, and I would prefer that the horse knows what targeting means. After that, then you can move to a classical conditioning procedure where you present the halter and you feed the horse. Present the halter, feed the horse. The horse doesn't have to do anything except just be around the halter, And then once the horse is comfortable around the halter, that might only be a procedure you use with horses that are a little bit wary of it or run from it. The next step, or the first step, depending on how you're starting, is to get the horse to acknowledge the halter. And depending on the horse's level of comfortability, that might be looking at it, putting an ear towards it, or touching it with their nose. Wherever the horse is comfortable starting is fine. As long as the horse is acknowledging it, you can click and then treat for that. So the horse begins to learn my behavior around this object is getting me reinforcement. So once you're progressed to the point where the horse is consistently touching the halter when you present it and you're clicking and feeding, and that is pretty consistent, you can start holding the halter open. Again, it's great when you have a stiff halter because you only need one hand really. You can hold it open and then have the horse touch it from there. Click treat. Once the horse is comfortable with that, you can start asking the horse to lower their head into it. And I want to be clear, this is not putting your hand on top of their head and asking them to lower it. It's no pressure. You are just holding the halter open and seeing if the horse will drop their head into it. Some will automatically do it because they know what halters are. Others, you might have to lower it a little bit when they go to touch it so that they drop their head and they do it on accident. Click treat. Oop, you did it right. Anyway, or you can hold a target stick underneath of it so that the horse, it goes to the target and goes through the halter. The key there is just don't move the halter up. If it moves down, that's usually not super scary for horses, but for some that have a little bit of a trauma or phobic reaction around halters, moving it up can be a little bit alarming. So just keep it at the same level the whole time. And then once the horse is consistently dropping their head in, you start working on a little bit more duration. The horse will probably bop his head in there and then pull it out, and then you just wait a second and they go back and they hold it for a second and then click. Just don't get greedy, just like half a millisecond more, click. And then you want to be sure that you're clicking when the horse's head is in the halter, not as it's coming out. And then from there, once that's consistent, the horse is really good. Have them move lower. See if you can start moving the halter side to side. Just get them comfortable with the feel of the halter on their face. And then at that point, you might be able to move it off and then buckle it. Move the buckles on the side of the neck that you're on, and then reach around. Break it down to whatever your horse needs you to do. With Danny, I probably could have broken it down to doing the head strap outside of having his nose in the halter, but he was okay with it. Not super okay with it, but okay enough for it to happen, which is not ideal. We want them to be super okay. So learn from my mistakes. And then once you can get the horse's head in the halter and then the buckle over, do that a couple times, on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. As fast as you get it on and you click, then just drop, and let it come off. Because we also need the horse to know how to deal with the halter coming off. A lot of people run into issues with trailer training because they are so focused on getting the horse out, the horse doesn't learn how to come out. So same thing with halter, on, off, on, off, on, off. Don't buckle it all the way the first time. And then you can move up to buckling and then unbuckling and so on and so forth. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. Let me know if there's anything that's confusing or that you'd like to see done differently, and I will do my very best. Okay, thanks guys.